Hi, everyone. Welcome to LA Climate Week. I'm Anita Kreins, Global Coordinator of Plant-Based Treaty. We are very excited by the inaugural first ever LA Climate Week. LA knows how to do it right. The need to transition to a plant-based food system is part of the conversation. Plant-Based Treaty is hosting 9 events this week. The first event was a town hall in the city of West Hollywood. And we looked at how we can take plant-based climate action via local legislative policy. We have more events to come and a climate march on Saturday. All these events are designed by the community for the community. We want people to learn what we can do individually and collectively. One easy thing that you can do is endorse the plant-based treaty. So we're just going to put that the website in the chat. It's www.plantbasedtreaty.org. It takes a minute to endorse the treaty. We've already had 200,000 people that have endorsed. So we need your signature so we can lobby for legislative change at the city level and other levels of government. We want everyone to participate beyond this 1 week and stay engaged. So you can find out more by going to Plant-Based Treaty or Better Food Foundation. Without further ado, we are proudly presenting in collaboration with Better Food Foundation a talk on Scope 3 emissions. Here's your host for today, Laura Lee Cascada. She is Director of Campaigns for Better Food Foundation.
Thanks so much, Anita, and it is great to see everyone today. So like Anita said, my name's Laura. I'm with the Better Food Foundation, and in a minute, I'm going to be handing it over to our main speakers. But really quickly, I just wanted to get things started by asking you all a couple of questions. So if you just joined, we did already ask folks to put their name and where they're from or what organization or institution they're from in the chat. So you can go ahead and do that if you haven't done that already. And then we just have a couple more questions for you all. So first, I'm going to share a word cloud and I'll drop the link into the chat for everybody to participate. And we're really interested in knowing what your favorite plant-based food is, or if you have a plant-based food that you really enjoy from your culture, you can put that in and we're going to see where everybody falls on this. So if you go ahead and click the link, and then I will share my screen so we can see all the everything populating. I'll give folks just a couple minutes to do that. So I just did a sample one so you all can see, just enter it on the right. And we're seeing some things pop up, cookies, pasta. So it looks like we have a selection of things coming in, and I'll give people a few more minutes to add to it. But if you want to keep it in the background on your screen, you can see all the fun things popping up, and then we can revisit it at the end and see the map that we've made. And then I also wanted to go ahead and put a poll up for everybody. All right, so you'll see a poll coming up on your screen, and we just really want to know what brings you here, why you're here, if there's, you know, something you are specifically looking to learn about, or you want to get active in making plant-based foods more accessible in your community. And I'll give folks just a couple of seconds to build that out. About 5 more seconds. Great. Can share the results. So we have a good mix of people, lots of folks who are already advocates and want to do more. Other people who maybe not know much about these issues, and other people who are just curious. So I think that's a great lead in to why we're here today. So I wanted to introduce our speakers really quickly. So we have Jennifer Channon. She is part of the team that founded Better Food Foundation, or BFF, in 2016. She served as our executive director since 2021. She's also served in the nonprofit sector for more than 20 years as a development director for Farm Forward and Found in Translation, program coordinator for the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association, and development consultant to more than a dozen nonprofits. She's raised tens of millions of dollars for farmed animal protection and social justice organizations in the US and internationally. Jennifer is also an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister who has served congregations in the US and Canada. And she has a Master's of Divinity from Harvard Divinity School and a BA in International Development from McGill University. And then we also have Kimmy Cushman, who is a scientific advisor and campaigner for Plant-Based Treaty, a global grassroots organization working to bring the food system to the forefront of climate change policy. Having completed her PhD in physics at Yale University, Kimmy is now leveraging her scientific background to educate policymakers and the public about the environmental impacts of animal agriculture. So I will hand it over to our speakers.
Great, thanks. So I'll go ahead and get started with sharing my screen. I'm going to give a bit of an overview of the environmental and social issues related to animal agriculture and how a plant-based food system can help mitigate these impacts. So I'm just rearranging my screen. Okay, So when you think of why a plant-based diet is better for the environment, you might think about issues with animal agriculture related to land use and deforestation, climate change impacts, and water use and water pollution. So it's not just climate change that's destroying the planet. Actually, we have 9 Earth systems which regulate the stability and resilience of the Earth, and one of them is the climate. But scientists have determined that there's 9, and each one interrelates with each other. And currently, 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries are beyond the safe operating space. So this tells us that the Earth is in a dire state, and we need to make a change. But animal agriculture is responsible for the violation of the planetary boundaries more than any other industry. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the boundaries of land use, land system change, and biosphere integrity, as well as climate change and biogeochemical flows and their relationship to animal agriculture. So first, I'd like to start off with this map, which shows how we use land on Earth. So what I want to point out first is that this small area here is only 1% of the Earth, or our land, is used by cities and infrastructure, whereas animal farming, from grazing animals and food grown specifically to feed animals, makes up 27% of all of Earth's land. And compare that to the cropland, all other cropland is only 7% of Earth's land. So that tells us that 83% of all agricultural land is used for animals. This is the reason that we are way beyond the planetary boundary for land use. And it's not getting better, it's actually getting worse because we're still deforesting the Earth's forest. 71% of deforestation is because of the expansion of animal agriculture. And so if we transition to a plant-based food system, we would actually use a lot less land. And it's determined that you'd use about 75% less land with a fully vegan plant-based food system. And that would be extremely beneficial because the forests, that 75% of land that's saved could be reforested and rewilded, bringing us back into a safe operating space for the land use change system and reversing forest collapse, improving our climate stability, and giving animals space to thrive and stopping the biodiversity loss, which is another huge planetary boundary that's being violated. So this is a huge way that animal agriculture is contributing to the violation of the planetary boundaries. Another issue is climate change specifically. So you may have seen a plot like this before, which shows a whole bunch of different types of foods and their climate change impact. And this is what you can see, that a lot of the animal-based foods have the biggest climate impact and plant-based foods have the smallest climate impact. Overall, the whole food system makes up about 1/3 of globally greenhouse gases, and animal agriculture is the biggest part of that. Emissions from animal agriculture come from indirect sources like land use in the form of deforestation, like burning down trees, as well as less carbon dioxide being able to be sequestered within the land, and fertilizer emissions from all of the cropland that's used to grow animal feed. Also, direct emissions like methane and nitrous oxide coming directly from the animals and from their manure and urine. One of the things that I really want you to take away about the relationship between climate change and animal agriculture is the methane. 1/3 of all the methane emissions come from animal agriculture. So that's coming from the manure and urine, and it's coming directly from the natural digestive process of animals like cows. And methane is a huge part of the climate problem in the next couple of years, and it can become a huge part of the solution if we slash methane emissions now as soon as possible, because the methane is a short-lived greenhouse gas that causes most of the warming in a short period of time. So we really have a chance to take control of the climate crisis and get it under control by transitioning to a plant-based food system that would reduce methane emissions a lot. So then the last issue, environmental issue I'll talk about is water pollution. So this is the biogeochemical flows planetary boundary. And the reason this is an issue is because of eutrophication and ocean dead zones. So because of runoff of fertilizers from cropland, as well as manure and urine runoff into waterways, this is causing these algae blooms like what you can see here and what you can even see from space. And these algae blooms take all of the oxygen out of the water, and it makes it so that basically they're called dead zones. The fish cannot survive. So this is something that's happening across the world, and animal agriculture plays the biggest role because of all of the land that's used to grow crops to feed animals, as well as their manure and urine. So now that was like a super brief overview of the climate or the environmental impacts. And obviously all those environmental impacts really have a lot of overlap in the social implications of those. Climate justice is social justice. But now I want to transition to really specific things with the food system that are social justice issues. So I want to start this part by saying this really powerful statement that we believe at Plant-Based Treaty, and that is access to healthy food and a food system that doesn't harm or exploit anyone should be a basic human right. And currently that basic human right is being violated in large part because of animal agriculture. So these social issues that I'll talk about really briefly today are infectious diseases, Indigenous and workers' rights, and access to healthy food. So currently, over 90 billion land animals are farmed every year, and the majority of those are small animals like chickens that live in factory farm conditions like what you're seeing here. These factory farms are breeding grounds for new viruses and represent a huge risk for new pandemics. These factory farms are also places where the farmers have to inject the animals with antibiotics to prevent them from dying before it's time for slaughter. And because so many antibiotics are used for farmed animals, it's actually the case that a plant-based food system would reduce antibiotic use by 75%. And that would greatly reduce our risk of antibiotic resistance. Some of the people that are on the front lines of these infectious diseases and antibiotic resistance are the workers in the factory farms and slaughterhouses. So I want to take a minute to talk about the impact on these workers. So this picture is actually taken at a slaughterhouse in California, where you can see that the workers have to take the chickens out of here, hang them up by their feet, and before they go into the machines for slaughter. And so to talk about this section, I want to pull from the work of my friend and colleague, Susana Rivera, who did her master's on the impacts on workers in factory farms and slaughterhouses. And she says, dangerously fast slaughter line speeds have been considered the leading cause of worker injuries due to the pressure to kill more animals in less time. Injuries range from lacerations to amputations, eye loss, hearing loss, and fatalities, with those classified as severe involving either hospitalizations, amputations, or loss of an eye occurring at least 17 times in a month in US meat plants. And it's not just physical injuries that the workers have to deal with. There's also the psychological trauma. She writes, the workers frequently report trauma, intense shock, paranoia, anxiety, guilt, shame, stress, and depression, with mental health issues occurring at rates significantly higher than the national averages and compared to other professions. These workers exhibit higher levels of psychosis, somatization, anger, hostility, and aggression, comparable to those found in incarcerated populations. So this obviously paints an extremely grim picture of what's happening. And I think that none of us would want to put ourselves in their position. But the reality is, and what I really want you to take away from this, is that this is an industry that does not have to exist. In a plant-based food system, nobody would have to make a living from killing someone else. So now transitioning from worker rights to indigenous land rights, remember that figure that 71% of deforestation is due to animal agriculture. And that means that animal agricultural expansion is causing the destruction of indigenous communities, and people are putting their lives on the line, these land defenders, to protect their homes because of industrial expansion in the name of expanding animal agriculture. And finally, I want to talk about access to healthy foods. So because of the way governments subsidize animal agriculture, animal-based foods are less healthy and tend to be less expensive, making vegetables, fruits and vegetables more expensive. Less than 1% of subsidies go to fruits and vegetables in the United States. And the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization found that globally, 87% of subsidies are harming to our health. So finally, I'd like to finish off this segment with a positive note about how there's communities that are trying to flip the priorities and make plant-based foods accessible to everyone. So I'll stop sharing my screen there.
Great. I'm gonna share my screen really quick, and we'll just show the short video. You all should be able to hear this when I start it, but if not, I'll paste the link afterwards as well for those who couldn't hear.
Definitely want to flip food banks.
Go to a synagogue, a kiddush lunch. Well, we're just trying to flip what the default is.
We didn't eat high levels of meat until colonization. What if we could switch that? What if we could flip that?
Food is reflective of all of our cultural norms, our gender norms, our racialized norms.
Food on our plate is an embodiment of so many of our values, our history, and our identity.
The future of plant-based eating is to think about more than just eating. We need to think about the whole system.
As vegans, we get it. So it's like, level it up. Veganism is great, but there's so much more. This is a space where veganism is the norm, and we're featuring people who are using veganism as a vehicle to change another part of culture. We are going to the change makers and finding opportunities to show a broader story about change and how people are accomplishing it. I've never, ever envisioned having a food bank or even being an activist. This was not planned. What do mainstream people want right now? Just the public. And I thought, well, music festivals. And then we make it vegan.
People talk about farm to table now. We've always been farm to table, right? This is really the basis for what we need to get back to, utilizing our traditional foods in a plant-based way.
What is and is not kosher in the way that our food is getting to our plates today?
People need a good reason to change. You have to make it make sense. And then, like overnight, the culture just shifts. beyond this trend, this is something that the world has to turn to through accepting change, especially something as little as oat milk by default. We can actually start to make those larger differences. Food really as a vehicle propel culture forward in a direction where we are servicing those who may be vulnerable, who may be marginalized, but we all have a common goal of accepting the notion that all living beings deserve to live and live happily. Flip it.
Just flip it.
Flip your food. Flip your mind. Just flip it.
Hi, y'all. Can you see and hear me okay? Yeah, thank you for that, Kimmy. I'll jump in. My name is Jennifer Channon. I'm the executive director of the Better Food Foundation. And I want to start by sharing a story. This is from about 10 years ago, before I started working for the Better Food Foundation. And at that time, I was doing a project to organize people at a Unitarian church in San Diego to create the church's first ever climate action committee. And we very quickly were able to pull together about a dozen people who were each passionate about becoming climate activists. And at our very first meeting, we went around and each person shared what was a reason why they originally got started on this journey towards becoming a climate activist. And I remember being surprised when more than half of the people who shared their story shared something that connected to our food system. A few of them shared that when they were younger, they had become vegetarian or vegan, and that had provoked plenty of conversations about food and the environment that had galvanized them. A couple folks shared about how they were concerned about animals, both what happens to animals on farms, but also what happens to animals as a result of climate change and ecological destruction. And so food was a deeply felt issue for this group. And yet, we did not end up making Diet Shift a major campaign. And this was because we were following the lead of big organizations like the Sierra Club and 350.org that told us that if we wanted to do climate activism, we should focus on energy and transportation. And at that time, they didn't have any programs about food and diet. And at the time, I assumed that that was correct. I assumed, like many people in the room, that if we were climate activists, we probably shouldn't tackle diet because it's too controversial, it's too personal, and it's probably not as impactful as other issues. Well, 10 years later, I have completely changed my mind. There we go. And so I'm here to tell you why plant-based shifts should be at the top of our list of climate solutions. And I think there's three main reasons for this. First is that animal agriculture is a top 3 contributor to climate change. Kimmy already explained this very well, but I want to share one piece of additional good news, which is that increasingly companies, governments, and institutions are collecting data about how they do business that really backs this up. And this is because just very recently, some companies have started to track and analyze what's called Scope 3 emissions. Now, you can look up what Scope 3 emissions are, but basically it's emissions that are produced in the supply chain before something gets to your company. So if you're McDonald's and your main business is selling hamburgers, we know hamburgers are one of the most climate unfriendly foods on the planet. But McDonald's has not had to be held accountable for that because they can always say, well, the greenhouse gas emissions that went into that hamburger, they happened back on the farm. They didn't happen at the McDonald's restaurant. And so they don't count towards our emissions. But that's starting to change. Policies are starting to make companies disclose this data, and some progressive organizations are voluntarily choosing to track and analyze this data. And what they're finding over and over and over again is that if you are a company or institution that serves food, most likely animal products are your biggest greenhouse gas hotspot. And so this is just difficult data to ignore. Number two, as Kimmy shared, shifting diets towards plant-based food solves multiple social problems at once. And then this creates another piece of good news, which is that increasingly we have allies across diverse communities who are going to support us in shifting towards a plant-centered food system. A few years ago, the Pew Commission released a study in which they found that 8% of African Americans already identify as having a plant-based diet, whereas only 3% of white Americans do. Multiple studies have shown that among Gen Z, more than half of Gen Z people say that they wish they ate fewer animal products and more plant-based products. And number three, the problem of animal agriculture has a really obvious solution, and that is that we need to consume less animal products and consume more plant-based foods. Now, while this is an obvious answer, it's not necessarily an easy solution. When I talk to people like Gen Z who say they want to eat more plant-based, what they also say is that doing so is difficult. And so they don't end up eating the way that their values align, because they say it might be hard to find plant-based foods at their schools. The restaurants they go to don't have really good plant-based options. Their families and their communities don't regularly make plant-based meals available. And they'll say that plant-based foods generally cost more than animal products. And this is because we have a food culture in which meat and dairy products are the norm. We have a food culture that encourages people towards eating meat and dairy products. But again, there's a piece of good news, which is that we have a solution that we know works. Our program is called Default Veg. And Default Veg, put simply, is all about flipping the norms in our food culture, from a food culture that puts meat and dairy at the center to a food culture that makes plant-based foods the easiest choice for people. Now, we didn't make this up. It's actually backed up by a lot of research that's mostly come out of the field of behavioral economics, which calls these kinds of changes choice architecture and behavioral nudges. And on our website, we have a report that goes through all of the various reports and research that show that serving plant-based food typically leads to more than 50 and sometimes as much as 80% of people choosing plant-based foods simply because they were offered as the default, even though animal products were available. But I'm going to spend the rest of this presentation showing you what this looks like in the real world. So here's an example of a restaurant menu. And I want to take about a minute and have you look at this menu and write in the chat everything you see that this menu does that makes it easier for people to choose plant-based foods or that normalizes plant-based foods. So I'll let you start writing that in the chat. And I'll share with you that I can see 6 things that this menu does to encourage plant-based foods, to make them the easier choice for people to choose. Yeah, I see some of you all are seeing what I see. Yeah, that's really good. So you can keep writing your answers in the chat, but I'll jump in and show you what I see. Number 1 is the ratio of entries. So on this menu, the majority of the offerings are plant-based, and animal products, the chicken tenders, are only 1/6 of the offerings. So they're playing with ratios. Number 2 is the order. The plant-based offerings are at the top, and the chicken offering is at the bottom. Number 3, if you see the little labels that they use. Now, often you'll look at a menu and it'll say V for vegan or VG for vegetarian. This one doesn't do that. This one assumes that the meals are going to be plant-based, but has a little picture of a chicken next to the chicken tenders so that you know if you really want an animal product, that's where you can find it. Number 4, If you look at the names of the plant-based foods, these are really simple, accessible, and yummy sounding names. Fried mozzarella sounds so much better than what we sometimes see, which is names like, I don't know, heart healthy cashew sticks, or, something like that that emphasizes healthiness. This emphasizes flavor. Number 5, if you look at the descriptions, these meals sound delicious. Making foods look good and taste good is one of the most powerful nudges we can use to nudge people towards plant-based food. And number 6, if you look at the prices, you'll see that they all cost roughly the same. They don't charge more for plant-based food. They charge roughly the same thing. So here's an example of a wedding invitation. And this wedding invitation says that the buffet will be plant-based and gluten-free, but that chicken is available on request. So instead of having folks write in if they need a plant-based meal, it assumes that plant-based meals are the norm and asks folks to indicate if they would like something different. This tactic can also be used in coffee shops. On the left is Pachamama Coffee, which had decided to take all of its blended drinks and have oat milk be the base for those drinks. So those drinks are all automatically vegan, and folks can still ask them to be made with dairy if they really want. On the right is a sign that was put up at the University of San Diego announcing that they now serve oat milk at no extra charge at all campus eateries. So they removed the upcharge for plant-based milk. And the University of San Diego is one of 6 colleges and universities that have stopped charging more for plant-based milks. And that's all because students on campus approached the schools and said, it's not fair that students who are lactose intolerant, many of whom are BIPOC students, have to pay more for plant-based milk. This tactic can be done in cafeterias. We did a major study with Sodexo, which was one of the world's largest food service companies. They do food for 400 universities, in which they saw what happens if you serve plant-based meals as the default. As you see, the sign here says, if you would like the animal protein option, please ask the server. And what it led to was a shift from what had been 31% of students choosing the plant-based meal to 82% of students choosing the plant-based meal, and no change at all in the popularity of their dining. And this led Sodexo to unroll plant-based nudges at their 400 universities. And finally, we can use this tactic in buffets. So on the left is an example of tips that you can use in order to arrange a buffet to encourage folks to serve plant-based food. And on the right is a list of some of the agencies in Hollywood that have started to recommend plant-based nudges and defaults as a ways to make TV sets and film sets more environmentally friendly. So I'm going to pause there, and we have a short video about plant-based defaults and nudges, and then we'll move on.
Currently, we live in a world where if we just walk into the supermarket, walk into the restaurant, walk into the coffee shop, get the food we want, we're probably getting the food that least aligns with our values.
The unfortunate reality is that most of the nudges in our food system are nudging us towards unhealthy foods, foods that are bad for the environment, foods that are bad for us. But it doesn't need to be that way.
Keeping the status quo the way that it is by design. It takes for you to recognize the design and then the desire to be a part of uncreating it.
Change at the food system level can be achieved relatively quickly if we focus on altering what we're calling food defaults. The milk that ends up in your coffee if you don't ask for a particular kind of milk, what your burger is made of if you don't ask for it to be a particular kind of burger. Focusing on changing defaults is one of the fastest ways to accelerate social change that we want to see in the world, but that we don't find easy to actualize when it's a matter of constant personal willpower.
That's a really powerful framework because you preserve the freedom of choice that people have.
It's really hard for people to change everything they do. Being able to have the default switch without any cost is like a perfect start.
the shift work in any kind of setting, from universities to coffee shop to hospitals and everything in between.
My generation, even if they're not vegetarian, a lot of people go for more plant-based options, not because it's just plant-based, it tastes good now.
We're getting a really, really good feedback from our patients. As an institution, we're willing to actually enact our values and show others that we are fully committed to be more inclusive and sustainable ultimately.
We can begin to kind of restructure and reimagine, right, what our food systems can be in ways that allow people to live flourishing lives.
It's in our self-interest and in the interest of our world to serve food to everyone in a way that makes the plant-based choice the easy choice. All right, thank you, everybody. And sorry, those videos sounded a little weird. I think Zoom removes the background music. So if you want to watch the videos the way they were intended to be watched with fun music, you can follow the links and they're all available on our website homepage. So we're going to take some time to break up into groups for discussion. We have 2 questions for you to discuss in groups. The first question is this: Kimmy and I have presented some of the myriad issues that connect to industrial animal agriculture. And we want to know which of these issues, or perhaps an issue that we haven't even brought up, is the one that resonates the most for you. What most emotionally compels you to think that plant-based shifts might be something worth working on. And number 2, if you have time left, we'd love for you to think about one of the places where you regularly eat food, someplace in your community, and answer the question of, do you think the way they serve food normalizes the animal products, or does it normalize the plant-based food? And what's something they could do to make it easier for people to choose the plant-based food in that setting? Laura is going to send everybody an invitation to a breakout room. And if you don't want to participate in a face-to-face discussion, just don't accept the invitation to the breakout room. And Kimmy and I will stay here in the main room and share some of our own answers to those questions. Yeah, and I'll reiterate, one is, which issue connected to animal agriculture is the most resonant for you? And number 2, what's something that could be done in a place where you regularly eat to make plant-based foods easier for people to choose?
So we have folks, just give them a couple minutes to join their rooms.
Yeah, and we'll have the rooms open for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and do a little debrief. And we'll have some time for Q&A at the end.
Okay, I'm gonna move a couple people around into different rooms because it looks like a couple of them only have one per. Okay, we got it. Everybody should be set with at least 2 people in their room.
And Laura, can you assign me to a room?
Yep. Do you want to go ahead and start the discussion for those who remain?
Yeah, great. So yeah, to the question of which of the many issues connected to our food system is the one that resonates most for you? Kimmy, do you want to jump in or should I go first?
Yeah, I can start. So, for me, the one that we didn't really touch on that resonates the most for me is the animal issue. So just the animals that are stuck in the food system that, as I kind of showed the pictures from the factory farms, they often live like really horrible existences just to be killed at the end. And like animals are exploited in lots of ways. So for me, that's the biggest driver for why I think we need this plant-based shift, because the food system is the biggest way that animals are exploited and harmed. And yeah, I think that I really liked what it said in the video about the plant-based default, is that like the way our world is set up is like kind of people are kind of directed to choose the thing that goes against their values the most. I think that a lot of people, if they kind of thought about it, like that we wouldn't want to hurt animals ourselves. That's why we wouldn't want to put ourselves in the position of the slaughterhouse workers. And so it's just really incredible to me how many different ways it overlaps. Like it's not just about the animals, but like also just all these justice issues that go together. So for me, it's like the thing that speaks to me the most is putting ourselves in the shoes of the animals, but also, the other issues are like kind of all there too. Jennifer, do you want to say your answer?
Yeah, thanks. It's fairly similar. I had been, trying to eat a mostly plant-based diet since I was around 18 years old, but I think the issue really galvanized for me about a decade ago. And actually, what really got me passionate about it was the issue of sexual exploitation. That had been an issue I already cared greatly about, wanting people to be safe from sexual abuse. And as I learned about the history of agriculture, one fact that I learned was that historically, the practice of animal husbandry, of like breeding animals on farms, co-developed with the practice of treating women the same way as property to be kind of traded and used and owned by patriarchal households. And it just made something kind of very vivid and real for me about animal agriculture being an industry that exploits bodies. And that made it more unacceptable to me than if it was just an industry that exploits land or exploits natural resources. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's an issue that connects so many things: labor issues, economic exploitation, human health, because it all has to do with like bodies, and at a cellular level, our bodies are pretty similar to each other. So what hurts one species ends up hurting another species too.
Yeah, I hadn't like kind of thought about it in that way. So yeah, I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, people used to like trade farm animals for wives and things like that. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, so maybe do you want to talk about the second question then?
Yeah. So, or someplace that you regularly eat, and what's something that they could be doing better to make plant-based foods easier?
The thing that comes up for me the most, or like the simplest thing, is they talked about in the video, is the plant-based milk costing extra. So I previously was living in Barcelona, and it was actually really rare to have to pay extra to get oat milk or like whatever plant-based milk. But now I live in Boston, and it's literally everywhere. I haven't been to a single place that doesn't charge extra. And it's like sometimes up to $1. And I just can't imagine someone who is like curious to be like, oh, maybe I'll try it today, wanting to pay an extra $1 to try it. Or like if they're like one way or the other, it's okay. Like you know, I'd like plant milk, but like it's $1, so I'm not gonna, like, I just can imagine how many more people aren't choosing the plant-based because it's $1 more. Like everything's already so expensive, and then on top of that, it's another $1. And it's just like, that makes me absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's such an egregious example of people just accepting something that's totally goes against what's for the social good.
Yeah. And also just on top of that, like I can't, I mean, it's not the case that it actually costs the cafe $1 to put like oat milk in my latte. It might cost them like 20 extra cents because the way our food system is set up, that plant-based milks are actually less expensive because of the subsidies in the dairy industry. But still, they're not even charging me the cost difference. They're making money off of this, and it's really messed up. And so, yeah, that's something that I think is huge. Yeah.
Totally. For me, a few months ago, I moved to this really small town, and so there's not a lot of restaurants, and most of them are geared towards tourists. And I remember thinking it was a really big deal and a good thing that like Beyond Burgers and Impossible Burgers were suddenly available, because these small town restaurants went from having 0 plant-based options to having 1 plant-based option. Um, but at the same time, I'm like, we can do a little bit better than that, because they have all of these other menu items that could easily be turned plant-based just by switching out 1 or 2 ingredients, and they don't usually make that an option. So I feel like especially in a region where a lot of tourists show up, and you have people with really diverse diets, it would probably be in their best interest to have more diverse menus.
Yeah, for sure. Can we answer the question from the chat from Erica? She said, what are your thoughts on diners and fast food restaurants offering turkey burgers as a default instead of beef burgers? So I can start by answering that question. So I actually hadn't heard of any diners doing that. It's very interesting. I think I would assume that they're doing it to reduce their food emissions, and like because it's more sustainable. I'm putting quotes around that to have a turkey burger instead of a beef burger because of all the emissions associated with cows. But I guess I would actually say it's not sustainable. So the reason I put the quotes around it is because, yeah, so we have 1 more minute, is because it's a huge issue with the turkey chicken industry, is that the vast majority of them spend their entire lives in factory farms, which that's where our next pandemic is going to come from. So I think it represents a major risk to the habitability for us as humans, but also wild animals, because these diseases spread between wild animals even faster than they spread to humans. So I would say that it's actually not sustainable for that reason. Maybe just really quick, because we have like 15 seconds left. I think that lab grown meat does play a big role in our food system, or like changing our food system. But I think ultimately, like, you know, because some people just really want to eat the actual meat. But I think ultimately it's going to be a combination of things, and also bringing people back to the roots of what they have always eaten, which is mostly plant-based. But yeah. So I guess we're probably going to have people coming back. Thanks for the questions in here. Oh, someone put another question, but I think we're about to finish the breakout room. So maybe we
Folks
can
will be trickling in over the next 60 seconds if you want to go ahead and answer that quick question.
Jennifer, do you want to do Isabel's question?
Yeah, you know, an interesting statistic that we've done that came out of our work with colleges is that male students are more likely to report feeling like it's better for them to eat meat than female students. Meat ends up being very gendered and connected to people's beliefs. And of course, that's also tied to the reasons why some athletes are really attached to the notion. Of course, there's lots of great data, and the movie Game Changers did a very good job of showing that there are plant-based athletes there, and they're very competitive. But yeah, there's some cultural stigma around eating plant-based foods that's connected to both gender, masculinity and athleticism, that is something that normalizing plant-based foods would help us get over.
I think we've got everybody back from the breakout rooms. If you all want to do a quick debrief, and then we'll jump into the ways to next steps from here.
Yeah, great. So does anybody from the breakout rooms want to share with the group one of the answers to those questions? So what is the issue that resonates the most with you, and what's happening in your local community that you could think could improve for plant-based?
Do we have the raise hand feature?
So maybe I'll start since no one has raised their hand, I don't think. So one of the things we talked about for ways that we see in our community, how the system is set up to disincentivize people to choose plant-based, is with the extra charge when you use plant-based milk in your coffee. I live in Boston right now, and they're charging almost $1 at every coffee shop to use oat milk instead of cow's milk. And did that come up for anybody? I'm wondering if anyone can share back. Yeah, I'm seeing nods. Does anyone?
We talked about that in our group. I was with Calvin and Audrey, and we talked about why is it always plant food more expensive than meat and dairy when they're not more expensive at the grocery store. So why is the plate and the dish more expensive, and especially the plant milk?
Yeah, it's really frustrating. Well, I hope people had good conversations. We don't have a ton of time, so maybe we'll just jump right into the ways to take action. So, Jennifer, do you want to go first, or should we go first? Plant-based treaty.
I'll go first. I'll be real quick.
Okay.
I was trying to, well, why don't you go first since I'm having some technical difficulties?
Okay. Sure. So let me share my screen. So, Plant-Based Treaty is a global organization, grassroots organization, and our mission is to promote a shift towards a just plant-based food system that would enable us to live safely within our planetary boundaries and reforest the earth. And our vision is a global plant-based treaty attached to the UN framework on climate change to enable a plant-based food system. So our plant-based treaty has 3 core principles. So one is relinquish no land use change, ecosystem degradation, or deforestation for animal agriculture, redirect an active transition away from animal-based food systems to plant-based food systems. And part of that, of course, is default veg. And restore, actively restoring key ecosystems, particularly restoring forests and rewilding landscapes. So the plant-based treaty has been endorsed by 30 cities around the world. And the way that you can take action is by getting involved in your local city and helping them become more plant-based, more default veg, and eventually endorsing the plant-based treaty as well. So we have a couple of campaigns, collecting endorsement, our city campaign, menu change in public education, and we also go to UN climate talks. And one of the ways that is really great to get involved as soon as possible for you guys is to help do our 100 cafes campaign. So we have a goal for 2023 to institute menu changes, including default veg, in 100 cafes and restaurants in 100 cities around the world. And we already have dozens of cities that are signed up. And that's one way that you can get involved. So I'll skip a couple of these things because we're really running out of time. But 2 things that you can do. So one is write to your city representative. We'll have these links in an email that goes out after the webinar, but write to your city representative using our online tool so that you can ask your city councilors to endorse the plant-based treaty and bring it to your city. Another thing you can do is attend our campaigners welcome call so we can give you all the resources you need and meet other like-minded people who want to bring more plant-based into their communities. Yeah, and of course, endorse the plant-based treaty. You can go to plantbasedtreaty.org and do that really quickly, as Anita explained at the beginning. So that I'll stop sharing my screen there.
Great. And let's see, do you see my screen up
Yes.
right now? Great. So real simple, the Better Food Foundation, we want you to take 3 actions. 1, we want you to experiment in wherever you have the ability to serve food. It could be in your own homes. It could be at a party in your community, at your workplace. Experiment with these techniques to make the plant-based food the easiest food. Number 2, you can sign up on our website to be an ambassador, and we have a training program where we will train you on how to bring these techniques to your company, your university, your school, your institution. And number 3, whether or not you are an ambassador, we want you to use the power of your voice to bring these solutions to your community. You can find ways to do all of this at betterfoodfoundation.org/take-action. Just find what applies to you, whether you're a student, a professional, doing this work in coffee shops, in cities, etc. I will pause there. Because of the time, I wonder if we might want to continue to do Q&A, but let folks know that that Q&A is going to be included in the recording that goes out. So if folks have to jump off the call at the end of the hour, they can watch the recording that we'll send everybody in order to see the answers that we have to the Q&A questions.
Great, thank you. So yeah, anyone who has to jump off, that's fine. And we do have a few questions. And Julie has been monitoring for me. So as I bring up the first one, she can let me know what the one after that is. Thank you, Julie. So the first one I have from the audience is, how do restaurants compensate for extra labor costs? And they brought up that, you know, more veg may equal more chopping, peeling, and cutting. Is that a misconception? Do we have any data on this?
Well, I'll share, one piece of data. We did a research study with Sodexo at 3 university dining halls of offering plant-based foods as the default. And one of the things we did in this study was survey dining hall staff about ease of implementation. And at least in that study, they reported that it was just as easy to serve plant-based foods as the default as it was to serve meat foods. And generally, this was an easy thing for them to do. Now this was a setting where chefs had already been trained in how to produce plant-based meals. Sometimes a bigger challenge is not that plant-based meals are harder to make, but that chefs have never learned how to make them. So sometimes there is a first learning step that needs to be taken. But we don't generally find that cooking with plants is more labor intensive, at least not when folks have learned good techniques for it.
Yeah, I'd also like to add too that there's also the extra costs associated with serving meat and animal-based foods because they tend to go rancid. You have to be really careful about cross-contamination. So there are those extra costs that we don't think of because they're the default, right? But in a place that serves less meat or no meat, you don't have to, there's less of that risk of cross-contamination, having to throw away a whole bunch of food. So that's another cost savings measure that by doing more plant-based.
Yeah. New York City's public hospital system, which includes 11 hospitals, piloted a plants by default menu for all of their patients. And at the end of 1 year of doing this pilot, they actually reported that they saved $500,000 in food costs. So the cost savings from the food itself might offset any kind of surprise costs that come from just changing over to a new way of doing things.
Great, thank you. The next one is there a difference in my footprint if I eat vegetarian or vegan, or is it the same? And is there any less animal agriculture used for eating vegan?
Yeah, so there definitely is a big difference, because I'm assuming you're vegetarian, you mean like plant-based plus dairy and eggs. And dairy has a huge footprint because you have all the issues with the cows producing the methane and a lot of extra land grown to feed the animals, whether it's the hens or the cows. So it's definitely, there is an impact. There's a big impact on water, on the climate change, so the greenhouse gases, and there's an impact on land use. So I would say, being vegetarian is a step up from the omnivore diet, but it's actually a lot better to follow a fully plant-based diet when it comes to the environment.
Yeah. I think we also encourage folks to make this kind of transition easy and simple to understand. And so while we could always quibble, well, this animal product has a greater footprint than this animal product, or, this vegetable might have a particularly high footprint. In terms of making it easy for us, just kind of the simple message that more plant-based foods and plant-based foods and fungi is better, less animal products wherever they come from is better, is just a kind of simple way to help decision makers understand the kind of change we're trying to achieve.
The next question is, how do you address cultural preferences for meat-based diets?
Yeah, our food is really all about culture. It's acknowledging that we have a culture right now that strongly encourages meat-based diets, and we are trying to shift culture. One way to shift culture is by example. And so when we get a university, a restaurant, a hospital, an event to serve plant-based foods as the majority of what they serve in a really positive way, people experience that. And then the next time they encounter it, it seems less and less weird to them. So that's how we're attacking that, how we're addressing the cultural dimension.
And also I'd like to add, because someone also mentioned about like the ethnic culture, I think there's a lot of like a false narrative about what foods people traditionally ate, because a lot of foods around cultures around the world are mostly plant-based, but it's because of colonialism and neocolonialism that people are eating a lot more animal-based foods. We're seeing the prevalence of animal-based foods track with the prevalence of preventable diseases like heart disease all over the world. So yeah, it's important to understand where that culture is really coming from. Is it coming from misinformation and bad actors or not?
Yeah. The strategy of making plant-based foods easier is adaptable to any cultural setting. We partner with organizations like the Afro-Vegan Society, which is doing this work in historically Black colleges and universities. One of our partners is a Mexican organization called Liberum that's trying to get menus at restaurants to be more plant-centered. We do this work with religious communities, the Jewish Initiative for Animals, Creature Kind. And each of these communities takes it and makes it their own. They make it culturally authentic for their own community.
Wonderful. Thank you both. And just to close it out, I will combine two questions into one. I think this is a great kind of takeaway question. So can we recap what the goal is here in terms of, do we want to entirely eliminate meat or make plant-based a default, or what is really the main goal with these kinds of menu shift campaigns? And also, if we can give just a brief kind of recap of what default veg or veg by default is and where all it can be used.
Yeah, I'll share. I encounter this question a lot when I go to environmental events. I was talking to someone who's the leader of a big foundation recently, and she was saying that for environmental reasons, her family has really cut back on animal products, and that, more than half of their meals are now plant-based. And what I told her is, if everyone in America did that, we would decimate the financial basis for supporting factory farming. That would be such an amazing outcome. At the same time, There's a lot of wonderful reasons for why a person might adopt an exclusively plant-based diet, but just in terms of social impact, at the Better Food Foundation, we're trying to reduce demand for factory farming as much as possible, however we can.
Yeah, and I would say with plant-based treaty, we recognize that the biggest, most optimal, like the biggest solution, the most optimal thing we can do in order for mitigating the climate crisis and bringing us back into a safe operating space for all of our planetary boundaries. The best solution is a fully plant-based food system, and we recognize that we're moving in that direction and that the default veg and doing that flip it, like making the default plant-based and making it's so much easier for people to access and to afford plant-based options. That's like an amazing step in that direction. So that's why we're here advocating for the default veg together.
Yeah. It's often people who have embraced a fully plant-based diet who are really passionate drivers of this work. However, our target audience is omnivores. It's people who haven't made that change, and we want them to have easy first steps to move in that direction.
Thank you both, and thank you all so much for attending. We will send the recording around afterwards, and we'll also send a few links and just more information on how you can get involved and bring more plant-based foods to your office, your school, your community, anywhere you would like. We can help you out with resources. So thank you all so much for being here with us.
Thank you, everyone.